the top, 3 rounds in, the reigning premiers are the only team without a win and they sit right in the basement. So what is it? Geelong have invited every question through these 3 rounds, from complacency to conditioning. It's all in play as they look to recoup a lost start.
G'day. So how do you immediately dissect that one, Chris?
The Gold Coast Suns, they've taken down the reigning premier, and the Suns get home by 19 points. And the reigning premiers are winless after 3 rounds. And that's the first time that's happened since 1976.
Clearly, we're a bit off, have been, in the early part of the year. But look, I don't think we've been horrible, but the competition's so tight now that, you lose a couple of tight ones, a few things that haven't gone our way.
They were as sloppy as it gets, and I just wonder whether Geelong have taken the foot off the pedal, and there's young, hungry teams who have gone past them.
They now have their premiership medallion, so you just wonder, even if it's just 1%, they've just lost that slight edge.
Are they just a little bit comfortable? And is that why winning back-to-back premierships is so hard? This is a group that's satisfied.
There's very little chance that we'll overreact, but you also need to react. It's not a matter of just saying, oh, I should be right. There are some parts of our game that are off, and we need to fix them as quickly as we can.
Regardless of whether they have a spike in the next 2 to 3 weeks, it'll be a dead cat bounce. It'll be a false economy. It'll be a false read.
It's been rare for us to actually get the opportunity to show how you can respond and fix things.
We've seen the end of an era. I think the Cats are cooked.
There would be a certain irony if after all these years of predicting Geelong's demise, it came when everyone had convinced themselves that they were primed for the tilts at back-to-back. How deep are the Premier's problems in your eyes, Jace?
We do love to write teams off when we get the chance, don't we? But I think the problems for the Cats are genuine now. Absolutely genuine. It's one thing to say that they're happy with what they've achieved, and that's OK, you're comfortable. That's all right. I don't buy into complacency. That doesn't mean anything to me, because once you've climbed the mountain, Gerard, it's the only place you want to be. You don't want to be down looking up again. You know how euphoric that feeling is. That's the only place you want to be. So I never tip into complacency. What I do tip into, though, is thinking that, oh, it's going to be OK because we have such confidence in each other. And sometimes maybe subconsciously you just haven't quite worked as hard as you could have, but you think you are. Maybe you're kidding yourself because, I know my mates, they're going to come good and we'll be all right. And they need to fix this before it gets much worse. And that means there's a big game coming up Easter Monday. But for me, the midfield is what's genuinely killing them, Gerard. They are getting beaten at contested possession, at clearances, things that they banked on in the past. It's putting the defence under pressure. They're missing a couple down back. So it's genuine. The problems for your boys are genuine,
yes,
Gerard.
It's across the board. So I went back and watched yesterday's game again this afternoon just to satisfy myself. So my observations were, one, there is no sign of the dangerous footy, their self-declared dangerous footy of last year. It's not there. For whatever reason, they are slow out of half-back in a way that they rectified last year, and that owes to, there's clearly no overlap run bar for Isaac Smith.
Yep.
And then there's not the quick target that they worked for. So they seem to be much more long down the line, which is a regression. The second part that's missing for me is that they are not a threat up front. Everybody's figured out that Tom Hawkins doesn't have the conditioning to be ready at this stage, most particularly the opposition. Yeah. Other than Jeremy Cameron, who every time it goes near, is they don't have anything like the forward pressure that they were creating, and that sense of menace and a multi-pronged. The third was, it was the toughness that most triggered me to them last year when they really dialed in. And the 2 games that came to mind were the Bulldogs game and the Carlton game in the middle of the year. There was a ferocity to Geelong that I really hadn't seen from them before. It hadn't been their trademark during those glory years. But they were ferocious to the point of intimidating around the ball, and that's not there. That presence is not there at the moment. And then the fourth aspect is if you look at individual players who played critical roles, so not the senior players who have their own standards that are not being met, but Tyson Stengel, Brad Close, Brian Myers, Tom Atkins, Max Holmes, and then Sam DeConey's got injured in all 3 games so far, is those were the players that their efforts and energies and competencies lifted the whole show last year, and they're not at their standard at the start of the year, and they would have hoped to progress. None of that has happened. So to my eye, that's where they find themselves. The question is how much of it's retrievable and how soon might it be put back together?
It's not a short-term fix, not when you're talking about conditioning of some of the players. And in particular, I think we all feel the pain that they're going through with Tom Horgans, and maybe they're trying to get his fitness back through match play, and that's okay. But in the meantime, he's suffering, his confidence is suffering, he's unable to get to the contest that he would normally get to. He doesn't have that burst of speed that he normally does. It's really interesting you talk about that kicking long down the line. That's something that Geelong's preyed on, the opposition doing for so long because they defended so well as a team. They'd make them kick it long down the line and then rebound and go. You're right, they've got none of that. I don't like calling them second-tier players because those players all had great years last year. But when the leaders aren't leading, and with all due respect to Paddy Dangerfield, who we know is a spectacular player, the new skipper is really struggling this season. Cam Guthrie hasn't reached the levels that he's played at so consistently over the last couple of seasons. So when you're not getting that midfield leading the way, all of a sudden the other players are being put under more pressure than they would normally be put under. So it's really interesting. I don't know that Chris Scott has a lot to go to. That's the problem. It's just a matter of persistence, hoping that it's going to turn. But when that happens, it could be later rather than sooner. You don't know.
Yeah, so I think that my most pertinent question with them is, can they get to 4-4 after 8 rounds? And at 0-3, I don't know the answer to that.
But they've got winnable
games, and their home games kick in late.
Yeah.
So that gives you the Bart Cummings preparation where they picked off the 16 in a row last year. They're a far cry from that at the moment. Can they get themselves to a platform of 4-4?
Well, it's the only reason I'm loath to write off a team like Geelong. A, you end up with egg on your face, but B, we know they can get on a roll at some stage. Now, that might come in the back half, and you're right. And they would not be the team you want to play if they go charging into the finals. And even if they sneak into 7th or 8th spot, but if they go charging on the back of 8 wins out of the last 9 weeks or something like that, they won't be the team you want to play. But getting to 4-4 from here, gee, it looks like an uphill battle at the moment, the way they're playing and the lack of weaponry that Chris Scott has at his disposal.
So it's only the second time in his career, Chris Scott, that he's had a team lose 3 in a row.
It's foreign to him, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's interesting when he says, there were 2 things I thought that were telling is he's quite looking forward to the challenge of doing it, because you're usually talking about a team that's been winning. And 2, I thought there was just a little hint of it'll be interesting to see how the players react to this.
So, but the great thing about it from a Chris Scott perspective is we might see something different from him. It's a new challenge that he really hasn't had to deal with. So what spin can he put on things? How does he find a way to get more out of his players? Does he move them around? Does he bring in some new faces? What change of tactics does he apply? It's going to be fascinating over the next month.
At the other end of the ladder, there's a huge feel-good factor around St Kilda. The community gathered en masse on Saturday night in record numbers. The champions of every era were there. Tony Lockett had to be, and he was. And then the team needed to do its bit. And that's not the easy part to order. But they did. They did it twice with an electrifying start. Then they had to win the game again after conceding all of their lead in the last quarter. There was a bursting sense of pride from the coach all the way down.
Yeah, we're very proud. Oh, no, we only did it once, but yeah, very proud. There's always a bit of anxiety because, like, 150 years, I don't think I'll see the 300 years. So we wanted to make the most of it. Clubs don't come together often. We saw Tony Lockett was in the rooms before the game, and look, there's been some very special players at St Kilda, and I know there's one cup. There's a number of grand finals, and but you know that's all done. We're building something here, and we've got our shoulder to the wheel. And if I didn't think it could be done over time, I wouldn't be here. So we've been here for 150. We'll be here another 150, and in that time, we'll win premierships. It's a start beyond what even the most optimistic would have forecast, I think.
It is. You know, I like the fact that they're actually playing Ross Lyon football, Ross Lyon style football, if that makes sense. So contested possession comes at a premium. They work as a team, and there's this steely defensive mindset. They hate conceding scores because Ross hated seeing big scores kicked against him. So I think they're playing a terrific Ross Lyon brand of football, and you can see what happens once confidence comes into a group. All of a sudden, all those players that we've been critical of in recent seasons saying they haven't taken the next step. Well, they're up and about because everyone feels good about the place. It's amazing what a dose of confidence can do. And this is also a club in recent years over the journey that hasn't traditionally been good on the big occasion or on milestone games, Gerard. So I think it was a great way to cap off 150 years, wasn't it?
I pondered this morning with Saints fans. Imagine having your happiness tied to Mason Wood and Liam Stockton. And that they would perform so well. So Wood's done it the 3 weeks in a row. But from the moment scores were level to the next 3 goals that were kicked, they were the 2 instrumental players.
Well, Mason Wood's an interesting one. He's had a good season, but I've never seen him play a game like that. He was dominant. He was every time there was an intercept mark or someone needed to take a contested mark, it was him bobbing up. I thought, my God, he's everywhere. He just covered the ground. He worked hard. Everything he touched turned to gold. It was absolutely outstanding. And it's probably North supporters going, where was that? Yes. Why didn't we see it? But again, it's players go to another club, a different environment. They get a new lease of life, and for whatever reason, it pays off.
How good to see Tony Lockett out there with the St Kilda faithful.
He's such an enigmatic character, isn't he? We'd love to see and hear more from him. You know, I've only had bits and pieces to do with him over the years, but it's always a time that you appreciate when you're chatting to him or when you're in his company, because he's fun to be around and you listen to what he does have to say. So it was great to see the beautiful Frawley women there as well. It was a wonderful celebration. Nicky Winmar alongside them. So they had the right people there and they got the right result and they played the right football.